February 12, 1943. The frozen coast of northern France, 47 miles southeast of Cherbourg, altitude 18,000 feet. Oberleutnant Werner Streib, a decorated night fighter ace with the Nachtjagdgeschwader 1, veteran of 38 confirmed kills against RAF bombers, peered through the canopy of his Messerschmitt Bf 110 at the American B-17 formation passing below. In his combat log recovered decades later from Luftwaffe archives, Streib wrote with unmistakable contempt, "The Americans fly with boxes strapped beneath their fuselages, crude, ungainly protrusions that disrupt aerodynamics and slow their already lumbering bombers. They look like flying warehouses, not warplanes, to German fighter pilots accustomed to the sleek, purposeful lines of their Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs. These American additions appeared almost comical, unnecessary weight carried into combat by pilots who clearly didn't understand aerial warfare. The bulbous radomes protruding from B-17 bellies seemed to confirm every Wehrmacht assumption about American industrial crudeness. Mass-produced mediocrity over German precision engineering. What Streib didn't know, what none of the Luftwaffe's brilliant tactical minds could have imagined, was that he was witnessing the technology that would systematically destroy Germany's most sophisticated air defense system. Within 18 months, these objects of derision would transform from mockery into instruments of terror that rendered darkness itself obsolete. The mathematics of electromagnetic warfare were already humming inside those ungainly boxes. Frequencies measured in centimeters, not meters. Detection ranges exceeding 40 miles. Targeting precision to within 500 yards at night. Through clouds, through anything. The SCR-720 airborne intercept radar, a device so advanced that when German engineers finally captured one intact, their best scientists would spend months staring at components they couldn't replicate. The technological confrontation had begun in earnest on August 17, 1942, when the United States Army Air Forces launched their first heavy bomber raid against occupied Europe. German fighters, guided by the Kammhuber Line, a sophisticated network of ground-based radar stations stretching from Denmark to France, shredded American formations. The 97th Bombardment Group lost 24 aircraft in their first 3 missions. By late 1942, RAF Bomber Command was hemorrhaging aircraft at unsustainable rates, 5.1% losses per mission, meaning bomber crews had only a 44% chance of surviving a complete 30-mission tour. German Würzburg radar arrays, operating on 53-centimeter wavelengths, provided such precise tracking that Luftwaffe controllers could vector night fighters to within visual range of British bombers in total darkness. Oberst Josef Kammhuber's defensive system had transformed German-occupied airspace into a killing ground. Since 1940, German night fighters had destroyed over 2,800 British bombers. Major Hajo Hermann, commanding night fighter operations, wrote in a tactical assessment, "The British fly blind while we see everything. American heavy bombers lacking night operational capability will be forced into daylight raids where conventional fighters will destroy them. We have mastered the electromagnetic spectrum." Allied commanders understood the grim mathematics. Night bombing was essential, yet current equipment was failing catastrophically. British AI Mark IV airborne intercept radar could barely detect bombers at 4 miles and was easily jammed. 3 different American solutions had failed. The SCR-540 proved too heavy. The SCR-580 couldn't differentiate ground returns from aircraft targets. The British AI Mark VIII, though improved, still operated on wavelengths vulnerable to German jamming. Lieutenant Colonel Milo McCoon, commanding the 57th Fighter Squadron, described the situation in a report to 8th Air Force Headquarters. "We're sending crews into night skies where German fighters hunt with effective radar, while our equipment is essentially useless. Without technological parity, we're asking men to die accomplishing nothing." The strategic imperative was undeniable. Operation Overlord, the invasion of Europe, was already being planned for 1944. Success demanded air superiority, including at night. The solution emerged from MIT's Radiation Laboratory in Cambridge, Massachusetts in March 1942. Dr. Luis Alvarez, a 30-year-old physicist from San Francisco who would later win the Nobel Prize, received specifications that seemed to defy physics. Develop an airborne radar system detecting aircraft at ranges exceeding 15 miles, light enough for fighter installation, precise enough for gun laying in total darkness, resistant to jamming and operating on centimetric wavelengths. The system had to be combat-ready within 8 months. "We're asking for physics that doesn't exist yet," Alvarez admitted to his research team in documented laboratory records. "The British cavity magnetron gives us the frequency, but miniaturizing the entire system, making it reliable enough for combat and doing this in less than a year? We'll be inventing half the components from scratch." The revolutionary breakthrough centered on the 10-centimeter cavity magnetron, a British invention that generated microwave frequencies with unprecedented power. American engineers adapted it into a complete airborne intercept system, designated SCR-720. The design employed a rotating parabolic antenna producing a corkscrew scan pattern, cathode ray tube displays showing both range and bearing simultaneously, automatic frequency changing to defeat jamming, and signal processing that distinguished individual aircraft and formations. The innovations were staggering. The system used pulse compression, transmitting short, high-power bursts that reflected off targets with clarity impossible for longer wavelength radars. Its short wavelength meant the antenna could be smaller, yet more directional. The display integrated range and azimuth information on a single screen. Most ingeniously, the frequency could be changed rapidly, making German jamming equipment completely ineffective. But the system demanded brutal trade-offs. The radar set weighed 415 pounds, equivalent to removing an entire gun turret. It consumed 3,500 watts of electrical power, requiring special generators. The vacuum tubes generated tremendous heat and failed regularly at high altitude. Most problematically, it required a dedicated operator with extensive training. The prototype SCR-720 first achieved target lock on December 8, 1942, during tests over Massachusetts Bay. When the oscilloscope showed a clear return from a B-17 flying at 15 miles distance through heavy clouds, the MIT test crew erupted in celebration. Wing Commander Derek Jackson, the British liaison officer present, immediately cabled London. "Americans have created airborne radar superior to anything we possess. Detection range and resolution exceed our AI Mark 8 by factor of 3. Test pilot Captain James Howard reported results that seemed impossible. Locked target at 18 miles. Maintained continuous track through clouds, through evasive maneuvers right down to visual range. The operator put me 200 yards directly behind a B-24 that never knew I was there. This changes everything." The hidden advantage was wavelength physics. German Würzburg radars operated on 53-centimeter wavelengths, effective for ground-based tracking but too coarse for airborne work. The SCR-720's 10-centimeter waves reflected off aircraft with knife-edge clarity, producing returns that revealed not just presence, but size, aspect angle, even aircraft type. At night, through clouds, the American radar operator could see details invisible to German pilots relying on their own Major Winston W. Mike airborne radars. Commanding the 404th Night Fighter Squadron, initially despised the SCR-720. His unit, equipped with the new Northrop P-61 Black Widow night fighters, lost 3 aircraft and 4 crew members between March and July 1943 during stateside training. "The 720 killed more of our boys than Germans would in our first 6 months of combat," Sabansky wrote bitterly in Squadron Records. "It failed during takeoff rolls, causing crashes. It overheated and caught fire at altitude. Its display tubes imploded, showering radar operators with glass. We called it the Black Widow's curse. The airplane wanted to kill us before we ever saw combat. Training protocols were brutal. Radar operators endured 120 hours of classroom instruction learning to interpret cathode ray tube displays, where glowing blips represented aircraft. The set possessed 6 different operating modes, each requiring different interpretation skills. Operators had to calculate intercept vectors while staring at dim green screens in turbulence, often while airsick. The failure rate exceeded 40%, but those who mastered it discovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Paul A. Smith, a 23-year-old radar operator from Minnesota, who would later be credited with 7 confirmed night kills, experienced the revelation during a training flight in June 1943. "We were hunting a target B-24 through clouds at midnight," Smith recalled in a 1989 interview. "Suddenly, my scope showed a return at 12 miles, crisp, clear, unmistakable. I called vectors to my pilot. We closed to visual range without ever seeing the target until we were 200 yards behind him. Perfect firing position. The B-24 crew never knew we were there. That's when I understood. This thing could make us invisible predators. The first combat encounters in August and September 1943 confirmed every Luftwaffe prejudice. P-61s equipped with SCR-720 couldn't turn with German fighters in visual combat. They couldn't climb as quickly as Bf-110s or Ju-88s. They certainly couldn't match the speed and firepower of the new Heinkel. He-2-19 Uhu night fighters Oberfeldwebel. Heinrich Prinz zu sein Wittgenstein, a legendary ace from Nachtjagdgeschwader 2 with 83 confirmed kills, filed a combat report on September 15, 1943, after encountering a P-61 over Belgium. Engaged single American night fighter. The aircraft was ponderous, slow to respond. We made 3 firing passes. The American evaded clumsily. Only darkness allowed his escape. These are no threat to experienced crews. In their first month, the 422nd Night Fighter Squadron lost 4 aircraft for only 2 confirmed German kills. British observers quietly suggested the Americans reconsider the entire program. RAF veterans joked that P-61 stood for probably 61 reasons to fly mosquitoes instead. But something strange was happening that German intelligence failed to notice. American radar operators were tracking Luftwaffe fighters from distances the Germans didn't believe possible. P-61s were finding targets on moonless nights through solid cloud cover, conditions where even German radar-equipped fighters struggled. When American night fighters did achieve firing position, their 4 20mm cannon and 4 50 caliber guns inflicted catastrophic damage in single bursts. On October 31, 1943, a lone P-61 flown by Captain Robert Ferguson and radar operator First Lieutenant Ralph Keyes returned from patrol with 127 holes from German cannon fire. Damage that would have disintegrated a Messerschmitt or Mosquito. The P-61's massive twin-boom structure absorbed punishment like no night. Fighter the Luftwaffe had encountered. B. Event that would begin changing German perceptions occurred on November 19, 1943, over the Ruhr Valley at 22,000 feet. It involved Captain Eugene D. Axtell of the 414th Night Fighter Squadron, and an encounter that would become legendary. Axtell's P-61, call sign Midnight Special, was flying combat air patrol when radar operator Lieutenant John B. Anderson detected multiple contacts at 18 miles, a formation of 6 Messerschmitt Bf-110 night fighters from Nachtjagdgeschwader 1, commanded by Hauptmann Reinhard Kolak, an ace with 41 kills. The German formation was climbing to intercept RAF Lancaster bombers at 24,000 feet. The Germans executed what should have been a perfect defensive maneuver, a climbing spiral that would force any pursuing aircraft to reveal itself. But Axtell, guided by Anderson's calm vectors, remained below and behind, tracking the entire formation on radar from 8 miles distance through complete darkness. Target climbing through Angels 2-1, Anderson called, voice steady. Multiple bogeys, count 6. Lead aircraft at 12 miles bearing 035, Angels 2-2. Axtell positioned for attack without the Germans ever detecting his presence. At 2 miles, Anderson confirmed, tally-ho on scope. 6 distinct returns. Lead target now 11 o'clock, 1 mile, slightly high. What happened next defied every assumption about night combat. Axtell closed to 400 yards on the trailing Bf-110, piloted by Lieutenant Friedrich Müller, a veteran with 12 kills, before the German crew realized danger existed. When Axtell opened fire with 4 20mm cannon and 4 50 caliber machine guns, the effect was instantaneous and devastating. Müller's Bf-110 exploded in a fireball visible for 20 miles. The remaining German fighters scattered in panic. Hauptmann Kolak transmitted urgently, Nachtjäger attacked from below. No visual contact before firing. How is this possible? But the revelation was only beginning. A single Bf-110, flown by Oberleutnant Klaus Schreiber attempting to protect his wingman, spotted Axtell's P-61 silhouetted briefly against moonlit clouds. Schreiber positioned for a perfect stern attack and opened fire from 300 yards with 2 20mm cannon and 4 7.92-meter machine guns. The burst hit with devastating accuracy. 17 20mm shells exploded across the left engine nacelle. The left propeller was shot away completely. 43 7.92-meter rounds stitched across the fuselage. The port fuel tank was holed in 7 places. Fire erupted from the damaged engine axle. unable to see his attacker, could only manipulate controls frantically while Anderson shouted warnings from the radar scope. The P-61 shuddered, dropped 3,000 feet in an uncontrolled descent, trailing fire and smoke, yet somehow remained controllable. Schreiber repositioned for a killing shot and discovered his ammunition was exhausted. He had expended his entire combat load. Pulling alongside in disbelief, he could see the massive American night fighter ablaze, trailing smoke yet still flying. The German pilot stared at Axtell with an expression of stunned incomprehension before breaking away. Axtell's P-61 limped back across the English Channel toward RAF Bradwell Bay. One engine dead, controls damaged, hydraulics failing. When it touched down 40 minutes later with emergency vehicles standing by, the aircraft was barely controllable. The maintenance chief stopped counting damage after reaching 150 holes. One 20mm shell had detonated inches from the cockpit. The armor plate behind Axtell's seat showed a crater but hadn't penetrated. Another shell had blown through the radar compartment, missing Anderson by 2 feet. The left engine's crankcase was shattered. Fuel lines were severed. Control cables were partially cut through. The left horizontal stabilizer had sustained structural damage that should have caused immediate loss of control, yet the P-61 had brought them home. More remarkably, Anderson's SCR-720 radar had continued operating throughout, tracking German fighters even while their own aircraft was burning. The survival of Midnight Special sent shockwaves through both air forces. American engineers realized they had underestimated the P-61's structural resilience. German intelligence, receiving reports from multiple crews including Schreiber's testimony, initially refused to believe them. No aircraft could absorb that much punishment and survive. Oberst Hajo Hermann, commanding Luftwaffe night fighters, ordered immediate investigation. His report to Luftwaffe High Command in December 1943 noted grimly, "American night fighters possess detection capabilities exceeding our estimates. Their radar appears to function on wavelengths our direction-finding equipment cannot track. Most concerning, their aircraft survivability far exceeds our fighters. We are no longer facing inferior opponents." By January 1944, American radar operators were learning to exploit the SCR-720's true capabilities. Major Sobansky, the same officer who had despised the system months earlier, discovered winning tactics through brutal trial and error. In a tactical briefing to newly arrived crews, Sobansky's instructions were precise. Don't dogfight with German night fighters. Use the radar to position behind and below before they know you exist. The 720 can track them through anything: clouds, darkness, smoke. They can't hide. Once you're in position, one burst from 400 yards is enough. The Germans have better maneuverability, but we have invisibility. The tactical revolution was complete. The P-61's weight and size, previously seen as handicaps, became weapons. From 25,000 feet, a diving P-61 could reach 370 miles per hour, faster than most German night fighters could achieve in level flight. The massive twin-boom design provided extraordinary stability as a gun platform. And the SCR-720 gave American crews what German pilots would never have: the ability to track, stalk, and kill targets that had no idea they were being hunted. Lieutenant Edward Ted Kopsel, who would finish the war as the top-scoring P-61 ace with 9 confirmed kills, developed a tactic called the invisible approach. Using terrain masking and the radar's precise ranging, he would position below enemy aircraft, climb into firing position using only instrument references, and open fire from 300 yards, often destroying the target before German crews realized they were under attack. Hauptmann Wilhelm Jonen, a Luftwaffe ace with 34 kills who survived an encounter with a P-61 in February 1944, described it in his post-war memoir. "We were hunting British bombers when my radio operator screamed warning. I saw nothing, only tracers appearing from darkness below. Our aircraft was hit before I could react. I dove desperately, evading by instinct rather than sight. We escaped only because the American did not pursue into the clouds. I never saw the aircraft that nearly killed us. It was like being attacked by a ghost." The true revelation came during the massive RAF raid on Berlin, during the night of March 24-25, 1944. This mission would demonstrate the SCR-720's revolutionary effectiveness. Luftwaffe commanders positioned 65 night fighters along the bomber stream's expected route. The Germans planned to inflict catastrophic losses using their refined tactics. Ground controllers using Würzburg arrays would vector fighters into bomber formations, where airborne radars would handle final intercepts. Instead, they encountered 14 P-61s from the 422nd and 414th Night Fighter Squadrons flying high cover. The American night fighters, guided by their SCR-720 sets, detected the German formation from ranges exceeding 15 miles, distances where German airborne radars showed nothing but noise. Captain James W. Bradford, leading a 4-aircraft P-61 flight, positioned his formation 8,000 feet above the climbing German fighters. His radar operator, Lieutenant Robert DeFord, tracked 23 separate contacts simultaneously, a capability German airborne radar couldn't approach. Select target cluster at 2 o'clock. 12 miles climbing through Angels 1-8, DeFord called calmly. Bradford's flight dropped into attack dives from 26,000 feet, accelerating past 400 miles per hour. Bradford's opening burst from 350 yards, 8 weapons firing in convergence, simply obliterated a Messerschmitt Bf 110. The aircraft came apart in mid-air, not shot down but disintegrated, wings separated, tail severed, crew compartment shredded into aluminum fragments scattering across 3 miles of night sky. Within 4 minutes, Bradford's flight destroyed 7 German night fighters. The Luftwaffe formation, attacked from above by invisible enemies, broke in panic. Some German pilots transmitted urgent warnings about twin-engine fighters with extraordinary speed. They didn't realize they were encountering a completely different threat. Hauptmann Martin Becker, an ace with 58 kills commanding the German formation, described the encounter in interrogation after being shot down later that month. "We were climbing to intercept altitude when aircraft began exploding around us. No warnings, no visual contacts, simply aircraft dying. I transmitted orders to scatter, but the attacks continued. Whatever was killing us could track individual aircraft through clouds. 3 of my most experienced crews, men with 30-40 kills, destroyed in minutes. I gave the order to withdraw. Withdraw from an enemy we couldn't see, couldn't track, couldn't fight. It was not combat. It was execution. The mathematics were undeniable. From 400 yards, each P-61 delivered approximately 180 rounds per second, a total projectile weight exceeding 18 pounds. At the convergence point, all 8 weapons intersected in a zone 15 feet in diameter. Anything in that cone faced a density of fire no German night fighter structure could withstand. By May 1944, the Luftwaffe was discovering another horrifying reality. The SCR-720 performed better at high altitude, precisely where German night fighters struggled most. The physics were unforgiving. The system's 10-centimeter wavelength gave crystal-clear returns in the thin, cold air above 20,000 feet, while German 53-centimeter Liechtenstein radars degraded significantly. Hauptmann Klaus Hartmann, a skilled night fighter pilot with 34 confirmed victories, encountered this reality during a high-altitude patrol over Holland on May 18, 1944. His Messerschmitt Bf 110, optimized for medium-altitude interceptions, was sluggish and underpowered at 26,000 feet. He never detected the P-61 stalking him from 4 miles behind. Captain Eugene Axtell, the same pilot whose damaged aircraft had shocked German intelligence 6 months earlier, opened fire at 380 yards. The burst lasted 1.7 seconds. Hartmann's Bf 110 absorbed 47 20mm shells and hundreds of 50 caliber rounds. The aircraft exploded. Hartmann and his crew were killed instantly. The loss of experienced pilots sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If skilled veterans with dozens of victories couldn't survive encounters with American night fighters, what hope did average crews have? Luftwaffe High Command ordered immediate investigation. The resulting report, captured after the war, made for grim reading. American SCR-720 airborne intercept radar operates on approximately 10-centimeter wavelength. Detection range exceeds 25 miles against bomber-sized targets, 15 miles against fighters. The display provides precise bearing and range simultaneously. Most critically, its short wavelength makes detection by our current equipment impossible. American night fighter crews can track, approach, and attack German aircraft without our crews receiving any electronic warning. This represents technological superiority we cannot currently match. In August 1944, an improved variant began arriving that would complete the German nightmare. The P-61B featured upgraded Pratt & Whitney R-2865 engines, each producing 2,800 horsepower with water injection, a 400 horsepower increase over earlier models. The improvement was immediate and dramatic. Where earlier P-61As had struggled to exceed 360 miles per hour, the B model could reach 385 mph in level flight and approach 430 mph in attack dives. More significantly, it could climb to 30,000 feet, altitudes where Luftwaffe night fighters simply couldn't operate effectively. Oberleutnant Franz Reschke, a veteran pilot with 27 kills flying the new Heinkel, Hitu-19 Uhu, Germany's most advanced night fighter, encountered the improved P-61B in September 1944 during operations over France. His diary entry, discovered in Luftwaffe archives, captured the despair. Engaged American night fighter at 28,000 feet. Our Uhu, supposedly superior to anything the enemy possesses, was helpless. The American aircraft climbed away from us effortlessly. We couldn't catch it, couldn't outmaneuver it, couldn't escape it. This is what defeat looks like. The upgraded P-61Bs created a distinctive sound that terrified German air crews. The twin R-2800 engines, each spinning 13-foot propellers at 2,700 RPM, produced a deep, irregular beat that could be heard from miles away. German ground troops reported being able to identify approaching P-61s by sound alone, a throbbing, unsynchronized rumble that meant death was prowling overhead. Luftwaffe crews began calling them Schwarze Witwe, Black Widow. But German survivors used another term, Nachtgeist, night ghost, because that's what they were. Invisible, unstoppable, impossible to fight. By October 1944, P-61Bs equipped with 4 165-gallon drop tanks could patrol deep into German airspace for extended periods. The configuration extended combat radius to 500 miles, allowing American night fighters to loiter over German airfields, attacking fighters during takeoff and landing. This capability represented the Luftwaffe's worst nightmare. Nowhere was safe. Oberst Victor von Losberg, commanding Nachtjagdgeschwader 3, reported in November 1944, "Morale among crews has collapsed. They launch knowing American night fighters may be waiting overhead, invisible, tracking them with radar we cannot defeat. 3 experienced crews refused to fly last week. I cannot blame them. We are sending men to die in aircraft technologically obsolete before they leave the ground." As Germany's strategic situation deteriorated through late 1944 and early 1945, P-61s increasingly focused on ground attack missions. The P-61B could carry 6 5-inch HVAR rockets or 4 1,600-pound bombs while retaining its radar and self-defense capability. General Major Adolf Galland, Inspector of Fighters, experienced P-61 ground attacks firsthand during defensive operations in December 1944. In his post-war memoir, he wrote, "They came at dawn when our fighters were being refueled. We heard them before we saw them, that horrible unsynchronized rumble. Then the rockets, streaking orange lines dropping from gray sky. The explosions were apocalyptic. A row of Bf-109s simply ceased to exist, transformed from aircraft into burning wreckage. The Americans had turned our own tactics against us, hunting at the moment of maximum vulnerability." On January 1, 1945, during Operation Bodenplatte, Germany's last major offensive air operation, the Luftwaffe committed over 900 fighters to surprise attacks on Allied airfields. The plan required German fighters to fly at low altitude in radio silence, hoping to catch Allied aircraft on the ground. Instead, they encountered P-61s providing radar coverage. The American night fighters, orbiting at 15,000 feet, detected the German formation from extraordinary distances. Some contacts were tracked from over 30 miles. The slaughter was methodical and merciless. P-61s dove into the German formations, destroying aircraft with clinical precision. German fighters, flying low and slow, had no altitude for evasive maneuvers. Oberleutnant Heinz Marquardt, one of only 23 German pilots who reached Allied airfields that morning, reported, "We were massacred before reaching our targets. Aircraft began exploding around me, hit by fire from above and behind. I watched Schmidt's FB-190 disintegrate, then Myers. Of my Staffel's 12 aircraft, I was one of 2 who returned. The others were killed by an enemy we never saw. We flew into invisible death and were destroyed." The final statistics revealed the scope of American dominance. Northrop produced 682 P-61 Black Widows during the war. At peak production in mid-1944, the Hawthorne, California facility was completing one aircraft every 36 hours. Each P-61 required 26,000 individual parts, 3.7 miles of electrical wiring, and 8 out 400 pounds of aluminum alloy. Yet American workers, 60% of whom were women who had never seen aircraft before Pearl Harbor, assembled these complex machines with precision exceeding peacetime standards. Meanwhile, SCR-720 radar sets were produced by Western Electric, General Electric, and RCA in quantities exceeding 3,000 units. By war's end, American factories were manufacturing cavity magnetrons, the critical component German scientists couldn't replicate, at a rate of 5,000 per month. Training reflected similar advantages. By 1945, the United States was graduating 7,500 pilots annually, each receiving a minimum of 400 flight hours. American radar operators underwent 120 hours of specialized instruction on equipment maintained to exacting standards. German pilots were entering combat with less than 80 total flight hours by war's end. In March 1945, Oberleutnant Werner Streib, the same pilot who had mocked American radar equipment in February 1943, was captured after his aircraft was shot down near Munich. During interrogation by U.S. Army Air Force's intelligence officers, documented in declassified transcripts, he was asked specifically about American night fighters. The same pilot who had called SCR-720 installations crude, ungainly boxes now spoke with weary respect. The SCR-720 is the finest airborne radar ever built. Its detection range exceeds anything we developed by factors of 2 or 3. The display is intuitive. We captured examples, and our radar operators understood immediately how superior it was. It operates on wavelengths we cannot jam or detect. When combined with the P-61 aircraft, which is more robust, better armed, and faster than we were told, it creates an impossible combat situation. But beyond the technology is what it represents: unlimited American resources. You lose 10 night fighters, you build 20 more. We lose one, it cannot be replaced. Your pilots arrive with more training hours than our instructors possess. Your aircraft have fuel for extended patrols, while we barely have fuel for takeoffs. Your radar operators practice until they achieve perfection. Ours are rushed into combat with minimal training and defective equipment. We mocked you in 1943. We saw your awkward installations and believed German precision engineering was superior. We were catastrophically wrong. We didn't understand the American approach: build equipment that works reliably, train crews thoroughly, produce in overwhelming quantity, and improve continuously. Your radars worked when ours failed. Your aircraft survived when ours were destroyed. Your pilots hunted us from positions we couldn't detect, using technology we couldn't counter. By mid-1944, every experienced Luftwaffe night fighter pilot understood the truth. The Americans possessed technological and material advantages we could never overcome. When you heard those unsynchronized engines, when you realized a P-61 was overhead tracking you with that impossible radar, you knew death was close. The sound haunted us: mechanical, precise, inevitable. Like everything American, overwhelming through superior resources and relentless production. The final accounting revealed P-61 night fighters destroyed 127 confirmed German and Japanese aircraft, with probable and damage claims exceeding 200 additional. But numbers alone failed to capture the strategic impact. The SCR-720 and the P-61 had rendered the entire German night fighter defense system obsolete, a system that had cost Britain thousands of bombers and tens of thousands of airmen. In July 1947, at a symposium on radar development held at MIT, several former Luftwaffe engineers attended as guests. Among them was Dr. Wilhelm Runge, who had led German efforts to understand and replicate captured SCR-720 units. When asked about the American system, Runge's response illuminated the technological chasm that had doomed Germany. We captured an SCR-720 mostly intact in August 1944. Our best radar scientists, men who had developed the Würzburg and Liechtenstein systems, examined it for 3 months. We understood the principles. We could see how it worked, but we couldn't replicate it. The cavity magnetron required manufacturing precision we couldn't achieve with wartime resources. The display tubes needed rare materials we didn't possess. The circuit designs used miniaturization techniques beyond our industrial capacity. We were studying tomorrow's technology with yesterday's tools. The SCR-720 represented something profound about American innovation. Not elegant complexity, but practical superiority. The system was modular, repairable, and maintainable under field conditions. It used brute force power and straightforward physics rather than clever tricks. It was designed for mass production by semi-skilled workers, not hand assembly by craftsmen. The Germans had spent the war building technically superior individual fighters they couldn't produce in quantity. The Americans built a radar system crude enough for factory mass production, yet so effective it gave night fighter crews abilities bordering on supernatural. Werner Streib, the Luftwaffe ace who had laughed at American radar installations in February 1943, would survive the war to become a commercial airline pilot. In a 1974 interview, 3 decades after the conflict, he was asked about his most memorable combat experience. His answer was immediate. Being hunted by a P-61, you couldn't see it, couldn't track it, couldn't hide from it. The radar saw through everything: clouds, darkness, smoke, rain. You were prey, and it was a predator with perfect vision in absolute blackness. We had ruled the night sky for 3 years. Then the Americans arrived with their boxes and their industrial power. And suddenly we were blind men being hunted by something that saw everything. The sound of those engines still haunts my dreams. The electromagnetic thunder had spoken, and the night sky belonged to America.